Did you know that we're hunter-gatherers again, and we're going back into being hunter-gatherers because of technology and the internet? And this is all according to media theory and also anthropology. If you've ever taken anthropology or media theory in college, this is going to be a really fun video essay for you to understand what is exactly happening on the internet and why are people becoming content creators and why are people making culture content? This is the answer. If you've never taken anthropology or you've never taken media theory, this is a little bit of a taste for you to start doing your research, especially if you want to become a content creator or you want to be a cultural figure. This is a really important part of understanding what's happening next. It's really important for us to understand that mass media, the mass media factory, it's basically falling apart. And I don't know if you've seen this through TikTok, because TikTok is one of the reasons why mass media fell apart, but also the internet. Obviously, it started happening already when people were making content and people were making blogs, and then they were making videos on YouTube. And I mean, YouTube is more powerful than Netflix. Think about that. In the past, this mass media factory had a monopoly on our reality. Because of legacy institutions, they had the thread of what we could have access to. They decided what kind of media we could consume. They controlled the stories, they controlled the narratives, they controlled the editorial content, they controlled the commercials, and we just kind of had to eat whatever they gave us. This is a lot of the people in the entertainment industry are basically mourning the loss of the power they used to have in mass media. So this panic that is happening, a lot of these layoffs that are happening, a lot of stuff that is happening in mass media is because of the internet. The internet is basically collapsing a lot of it. And this is something that theorists like Marshall McLuhan, who is a very famous media theorist from the 1960s, he predicted would happen with mass media, that the electric media was going to start to collapse all of this old modern media, and we were going to enter the postmodern era. And that's where we are right now. We're in the postmodern era of media. And this is very important to understand because in the beginning, when people were hunter-gatherers, right, when we were hunter and gathering, there was no mass media. So where did this all come from? And a lot of it came from because of the printing press. If you read Marshall McLuhan, he talks about the printing press being such an important factor in mass media and mass communications. And now we're seeing the collapse of that because of the internet. So electric media has basically made us into hunter-gatherers again. So people went from having these specialized jobs, right? These specialized roles, and they're becoming universal casualties of the speed or electric environment where everything is happening so fast. We're going back into the hunter-gatherer spaces, and we're not technically going out there and hunting and gathering, but our culture it's becoming a lot more centralized. It's becoming more generalist and not specialist. So a lot of these corporations, what they're doing is they're laying off a lot of people who were mid-level or lower level people that are just kind of like babysitting everyone else. They are being let go, and a lot of this stuff is collapsing. So this very specialist person, the roles that are very, very specialist based, are losing their jobs. But the more generalist people, the people that do multiple things, they are starting to have a lot of bigger roles within the culture. And that is where we come from in terms of content creation, in terms of culture, is understanding how to become a participant in a participatory role inside of media, inside of your environment. That could be your business, that could be life, whatever it is you're doing. This is where you need to go from being a specialist to a generalist. And that's where we're going. And Marshall McLuhan literally predicted the future. So when humanity discovered agriculture, our media architecture split in two, and there were two different lanes that people went to. So there was the shamans who traveled, and then the shamans who stopped traveling. So the shamans who stopped traveling, they basically built a hierarchy system, is what we see now. And this is from an anthropology book called The Death and Resurrection Show, From Shaman to Superstar. And this is what we're kind of learning is, how do we become a shaman, basically, of the cultural age of this electronic age. So the shamans who stopped traveling, they had to create hierarchies. And this is what we see in our culture today, especially Western culture. You see a lot of hierarchies, and you have to basically potlatch your way into going up those hierarchies. Then you have the shamans who stopped traveling, and these were nomadic and they were a lot more participatory. So these were cultures that were just traveling and they kept their culture intact and they didn't stay stable in these hierarchies. The shamans who stopped traveling created a priesthood. So if you think about mass media, you think about the priests. I mean, you can think of hip hop, right? Who are the priests of hip hop? The priests of politics, the priest, you can think of the priest. It's not just church people. It is also other corporations like, oh, the chief executive officer. That is a priest of your company, right? So you have all of these priesthoods that happen because we humans stopped traveling. So we settled into agricultural communities, and this allowed a caste system to monopolize religious knowledge and writing. So you had to get your information from the priest at the top. And that is where mass media started to be created. In order to maintain control, they distrusted private ecstasy and separated the public from the sacred. So basically, if you wanted to have the sacred seance or the sacred shamanism, you couldn't access it. You had to become a priest. So the tribe was transformed into a tribe that was transformed into a passive audience. So we became very passive people. We just ate whatever they gave us in terms of media. Is the hard shell that is hidden around this ecstatic center. So where does music come from in dance? It comes from the shamanic rituals of hunter-gatherers. And so in order to hide that from the big private priest elites, you had to hide it around show business. And so show business, according to this author, he says that show business is basically a sliver of what the tribal rituals were during hunter-gatherer times. To survive in the static civilizations, nomadic people and nomadic magic was comprised into the show. The participatory healing seance was hidden behind a smokescreen of spectacle. The audience forgot that they were meant to be the participants, because if you look at this in shamanic rituals and then also hunter-gatherer spaces, there's participants. There's not just an audience just watching you perform as a shaman. You are participating. The tribe is participating within this ritual, and the performer becomes separated from the entertainer. And this is where you have show business, where you have an audience. So you go from a tribal ritual of shared experience and shared space, and then it gets comprised, and then it goes into show business where you have one figure and everyone else is just the audience. And there is no shared space and no shared ritual. This is what mass media did to people. It gave only certain priest elites the ability to be the speakers of the culture, and everyone else was an audience. So because the shamans who kept traveling, they preserved this active field. So the nomadic life was too transient and sustained rigid class hierarchies. And so the traveling shaman could not monopolize power. They had to share it with other people, because when you stop traveling, you start to monopolize power. In the nomadic seance, the psychological line between performer and onlooker disappeared. The onlookers chant, move, and complete the ritual, with the shaman creating the ritual. Here's the great divergence of media architecture. The settled priesthood people, because of geography, they became stagnant and agricultural. They also built a caste system and a hierarchy, and they monopolized power through priesthoods. The role of the public was passive spectators. We were just the audience, and we just had these priests performing for us or to us. And the modern equivalent of mass media in Hollywood. This is where you have this mass media happening because of the priesthood, and they controlled what we could see. And this is what we're seeing with the collapse of Hollywood now, because the internet has given us the power to become nomadic shaman. Because in a way, we're not physically traveling, but our voices can travel, our faces can travel. We could travel through the internet. We can call somebody in Japan right now. We are traveling, not physically, but energetically. Our voices are traveling. This is where we're going back to. This is the point we're going back to. We're going back to being nomadic and fluid. And this is what happened when shamans kept traveling and cultures with shamanic people kept traveling. It became more agrarian and tribal. The power was shared and demonstrated. You had to prove that you were a shaman every single day. The state of energy was embraced, and the role of the public was active co-creators, participants. We are all participating. There is no audience in this space. Look at Roblox. There is no audience. You don't just sit and watch kids play. You go in there and play too. Active participants. And so the modern equivalent of this is electric creator platforms. So platforms that support creators and making content. This is where we are. in terms of becoming a shaman and understanding that we're going back to this space. So if you look at the difference between the cinema and the screen, there are two different things. So McLuhan talks about this as well, that when you're watching a movie, it is being projected light away onto the wall. So you're watching this figure, whatever it is you're watching it from a projection from behind you. And so this is just a shadow. You're watching the shadows. And this is the film industry. This is how the film industry was created. But television, on the other hand, it is something that it is light being projected onto you. It's onto your eyeball. So if you're watching me on your computer, phone, whatever it is you're watching, there's light being shine into your eyeballs. And so I have a theory. This is part of my theory here, is that it's the same as a fire. So when you are around a little fire and people are telling stories, you're not looking at their eyeballs. You're watching the fire, right? You're looking at the light of the fire most of the time. And so light is being shined onto your eyeballs as someone is telling you a story. And that's why film and our screens and all these things are so impactful and more important than cinema or film or like movie theaters. And people prefer television and their phones over a movie theater because it is more tribal, because it is light shining onto their eyeballs like a fire would. McLuhan talks about this a lot, of when did this transition happen, when mass media was starting to basically die and the speed of light was destroying this mass media environment, and we went into the electric media, which is basically the light bulb. That is what electric media is. When we invented the light bulb, we were starting to go into electric media. So since Sputnik, this is what McLuhan says, that since Sputnik, the planet has ceased to be an isolated physical space. Electric media breaks down the rigid hierarchies of agricultural civilization. It throws us back into a total field environment where the identity must be tracked and pursued. We are all hunters again. Because of electric media, we are becoming hunter-gatherers again, and mass media slowly losing its grip on us as hunter-gatherer humans, because that is what we are. We are hunter-gatherers. And so we are going back to being hunter-gatherers because of electric media, like the internet, like TikTok, like YouTube Shorts, like Netflix, all these spaces, they're helping us become more hunter-gatherers. So the global theater has no spectators, only cast members. And this is something that McLuhan proposed, that when Sputnik went up into space, that we became part of this global theater. In this global theater, we basically are on camera at all times, and because of the Sputnik. And so we can now become participants of the world the same way we were when we were hunter-gatherers. We now have the spotlight. We are being shined light on us, and now we can take up space, because in the global theater, there are no passengers, only crew, meaning that you're going to have to make content. You're going to have to start creating. You're going to have to start showing yourself. You cannot rely on these old ways of being, this modern ways of being. We're in the postmodern era. Now you're going to have to start creating. So when you navigate digital platforms, we're literally traveling through alternate reality, symbolic tribes, and other people's nervous systems. And the public is no longer a passive market waiting to be packaged some myth or some artist to be fed to us, or some person or some brand to just be fed to us. They have to prove themselves to us in order for us to care. We have to become shaman who travel. So as a content creator, as a creative, as a brand, whatever it is that you do, as an artist too, because I do have students who are artists as well. This is important because you have to understand that the collapse of this lottery system, basically a pick Misha, you're going to get picked to be at the top of the shamanistic, you're going to get picked to be the artist, the one that gets all of the shine. That model is dying in the music industry, in media, and all the other spaces. You're going to have to earn it through participation. You're going to have to demonstrate your powers. You're going to have to demonstrate how powerful and how much knowledge you have inside. If you're a good singer, you're going to have to sing. If you're a good rapper, you're going to have to rap. If you're a great theorist, you're going to have to theorize and actually show us so that we can then connect to you. So you have to demonstrate your power. Creators must prove their power in real time, moving the room. Legitimacy cannot be granted anymore. That's why people make fun of Nepo babies, because Nepo babies have been a thing. But back in the day, they could just be plopped right on the little mountain of Hollywood or whatever it is they were doing. But now that's not the case anymore. Now you have to prove that you're amazing. amazing. This is the death of manufacturing the ordinary. Institutions once controlled the myths of everyday life, this mass media myth that they were trying to push to us, right? These grand narratives that they were trying to push to us. This is the death of that era. Now regular people can broadcast reality directly, forcing legacy media to retreat to extreme or synthetic specialized spectacle to justify their scale. So in a way, this is my theory. I think that because we humans can prove ourselves, we can point a camera at our lives. Why would we want to watch a movie about a regular Joe? Why? I could just point the camera at myself. So a lot of Hollywood and a lot of these institutions are going to have to start making content that's more fantastical, that's more interesting, that we cannot just see outside in our front door. We're going to have to walk into the movie theater and travel to Mars or travel to some other place or some alternate universe, because you cannot compete with regular people. You do not have an audience. You have counterparts. And this is what I said. I say this a lot in some of my other videos, is you have counterparts. You no longer have an audience. You don't have fans. The fan is dead. This is my thing about, there's no fans anymore. There are no passengers on this earth anymore. We are all crew. We are all counterparts to each other. So the target audience is the language of a dead broadcast factory. In the hunting gathering environment, you are seeking the humans who complete the exchange. It's not an artist and a fan. It's a guide and a seeker. The creator opens a threshold and the counterpart crosses it. So you're a creator and you have a counterpart, and you have to understand who your counterparts are, who needs you. So what are you creating that somebody else wants or wants to co-create with you? We're going from this machinery of selection to magic of invitation. The old machine model demonstrated that we want to be chosen, that we're pick-me's. We're not pick-me's anymore. The participatory model demands that we build a fire. The future belongs to those who stop acting like specialists, who are part of this collapsed factory and embrace a role as a traveling shaman, tracking the invisible, sharing the power, and inviting the tribe into their spaces. So that is the whole point of my presentation, is that the fan is dead. That if you want to understand how to become a content creator, study shamanism, study media theory, and understand that that is what you're doing. But also you cannot hide behind BS. You have to prove yourself through your content.